So let's get started. I'm very pleased to be joined here today by our panellists Claire Duffy, Dr. Sophie King-Hill and David Russell. So welcome. Dr. Claire Duffy is founder and artistic director of Civic Digits, a theatre company, and her latest production, Many Good Men, examines the causes and effects of the incel movement. Dr. Sophie King-Hill is an associate professor in the Health Services Management Centre at the University of Birmingham. And David Russell is the development lead and service manager at Thriving Survivors and previously held the position of Community Safety and Justice Manager at Midlothian Council. So welcome to all our panellists. So pleased you could join us today for what will be a thrilling discussion around incel culture. There'll be an opportunity for members of the audience to put questions and views to the panel throughout the event. However, if I may start, I'd like to open the debate by asking each of our panellists, how would each of you define the term incel culture, and how would you describe its impact on young people in today's society? So, Claire, we'll go to you first because you're sitting next to me.
Yeah, that's a really hard one. I'm not sure that I can really define it. I can talk maybe a little bit about what it means to me through the work that I've done on Many Good Men with making a show and working with two groups of young people and exploring what incel culture is with them, and also the research that I've done online. I started researching incel culture by creating a sort of safe space for myself on the internet. I created an email that was just not attached to me in any way, and I typed in how to get a girlfriend, and I just kind of like wanted to see what the algorithm did. So I found within sort of, you know, there was sort of maybe 10, 30 minutes, maybe an hour of fairly benign relationship advice, which included stuff like have a shower and smile, be polite, open doors, that kind of thing. But very quickly it started to become about work harder, be strong, make money, be rich, be the boss, get the girl. And that message then quickly became more violent and more depressed as well. And so I started finding myself watching lots of self-recorded interviews with young men, mostly young men in cars on their own, talking about how desperate they were. So I think my sort of definition of inceldom is that it's a space that's being created by young men in order to address a very real problem, which is a lack of love in their lives. And I think that they're not, and what I would, you know, and I suppose the impact of that is that their solution to that lack of love is blame, the blaming of women for it, the blaming of all sorts of different causes of it, but they focus on women, they focus on this idea of lookism, this ideology of lookism, which means that they believe that the world is all structured around good-looking people and they don't believe that they are good-looking. And so therefore the blame is against society, against good-looking people and against women, all women. And that then impacts onto specifically women, because they then get to be the brunt of everything from being called bitch to being raped or violently attacked.
Thanks, Claire, for that. Would you like to come in, David, about what incel culture is and its impact?
Yep. I think what's important to look at is what it isn't, before we even look at what it actually is, because I think it's very much at times misidentified. I think at times it falls into other areas. So when we look at things such as, for example, kind of influencers, etc., for example, tape, these areas get pulled into the conversation a lot, but these are very different aspects of the problem, and I think that's really important to highlight. I think it's certainly, when we say about its actual foundations, I think what we have to remember is it was founded on vulnerability by a woman. Is something that's really important to mention as well, in terms of someone going on to seek, like you mentioned, Claire, access to relationships, intimacy, conversations and dialogue. And quite quickly what we've seen from that is people accessing it, which became pulled into that kind of manosphere area, which then is put a bunch of vulnerable individuals often into one space, which again we know highlights kind of increased risk of kind of radicalisation and also exploitation. So those are the themes, and I think hopefully we'll unpack them in a lot more detail as we go on.
I hope so. Sophie, would you like to come in with your views?
So my views align with the ones that have already been outlined. But the thing for me that is quite often missed within wider society is actually the vulnerability. You know, these young men and boys are monsterised by the rhetoric, the social rhetoric that is talked about when we talk about incels. So, for example, we've got, me and David have got an incel project at the moment, and as part of that, we're looking at how they are viewed. So, society either ridicules incels or monsterises them, but actually, when we look at the data that we've got, they're lost boys, they're vulnerable, they're emotional, there's talk of mental health issues. So it's quite sad, you know, when I do the research that I do, so I've done a lot of work with young men and boys, I've done work in the fire service, I do a lot on harmful sexual behaviours and healthy sexual behaviours. It's one of the projects that's made me feel sad. You know, when I went into it initially, I did think, oh gosh, you know, I'm going to read this really extreme misogynistic stuff and feel quite disturbed by it, you know, and you've always got to look after yourself and your well-being when you're immersing yourself in data such as this. What I didn't account for was how sad I felt for these young men and boys and how they felt like society had neglected them. But I think that's a theme that it's definitely a theme that I'm seeing in the work with young men and boys that I've got at the moment that aren't incels, with the fire service, so male firefighters, that we're marginalising men. And by doing that, we're making the problem worse because everything that we've done today isn't working. It's getting worse. You know, this isn't a problem that's going away. This is a problem that's escalating. So we need a complete reframing of the problem and how we tackle it.